we're so glad that you're here.
Cool. So I'll do a little intro about who Hectic is for those of you that are not active Hectic users. I know we've got a lot of folks from Austin's audience today. So we've been around since early 2020, and we started Hectic to help freelancers be more successful. Everybody on the team, myself including, has been a freelancer at some point or is actively freelancing. I've been an entrepreneur in the tech space for 20 years. And like the problems you face building tech companies are not that much different than the problems people face trying to get their freelance business off the ground. And so it was always really important to me to not just bring another piece of technology into the world, but also with this company, like make a difference and actually try to help freelancers increase their odds of success. And when we started, we took like it was a three-pronged approach to how we were going to do that. One was education, and this workshop series is the latest iteration in our education efforts. We've got our guides and we've got a Hectic Academy that helps very new freelancers think about running like a business. We had our podcast, and this workshop is really the continuation of the podcast, where we're bringing on experts to come in and talk to freelancers about how they found success. And the whole first season of this workshop series is all going to be around getting more customers and making more money with the customers you already have. So I think everybody can benefit from that. The second leg of the stool was providing exceptional support and listening to the community about what they actually needed, both from the technology side as well as the education side. So, anybody who is on this that is a Hectic user knows that when you chat with us, we're always there. And we love chatting with you and helping solve problems and, listening to feedback and improving both the education side of what we do as well as the product side. And the third, which is, as far as I'm concerned, kind of table stakes, was bringing a great piece of technology into the world. And Hectic has come a long way in the 3 years we've been in business. And I think, we're proud of where it is, but we're always moving it forward. And it's folks like everyone on this workshop that give us feedback and help us move it forward. So thank you for joining us today. These workshops will be happening every 2 weeks with lots of awesome people. So make sure you watch those emails and register. And thanks for Austin for running the first of our workshop series, and give it over to Michelle to talk about some logistics for today.
Yeah, we're so glad that you're here. Wanted to let you know we're going to do a question and answer at the end. So please use the Q&A, and Austin will answer all of your burning questions at the end. You can also drop those in chat. I'll be there hanging out, saying hello, answer anything that I can answer before the Q&A. And after this, if you want to take notes, that's great. We'll also send you a replay of this video, and you'll get all of Austin's slides as well. So without further ado, my pleasure to introduce Austin L. Church, not to be confused with churches in Austin. And take it away.
Yeah, I still feel a little bit sheepish about that pretentious middle initial, but it was one of the better decisions I made right when I was kind of getting online years and years ago, because there are lots of churches in Austin, Texas. Anyway, you all didn't come to hear me talk about that. I'm going to go ahead and start the slideshow. But first, let's do the awkward sort of screen share thing where we'll see if I can actually do this appropriately the first time. Okie doke. All right. So what do you all see? Cover slide? Cool. All right. So, like Michelle and Jeff said, just leave your questions in the chat, and it would help if you like started with Q colon so that they're easier for us to find later. I actually can't see anybody but Jeff and Michelle right now, so I'll just assume all this stuff is
So there's
landing
actually
well.
one quick correction there. There is a separate Q&A button down at the bottom. If you put your questions in there, it'll be easier for us to find them when we get to that part. So questions over there, meaningless chatter in the webinar chat.
Meaningless chatter, welcome. Okay, so I'm going to fly through this. Like Michelle said, all this will be available later. I just want to make sure we have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So a little bit about me. Some of you know me, some of you don't. I'm currently a mentor and coach for freelancers. I've been freelancing myself since April 2009. A lot of my freelancing these days looks like fractional CMO engagements, and there's a lot of brand consulting that is involved with that. Husband, father of 3, writer. I love to run, if we want to call it that. I'm very slow, and I love barbecue. I have way too many smokers and grills outside, but I'm always looking to buy more. And I think it's important to note that like my background was English, liberal arts. I got a master's in poetry writing and never imagined that I would need to be in sales. And so my entree into freelancing kind of built in me a paradigm that, you know, I had this strong distaste for sales. And so early on in my career, it really messed with my self-concept when I suddenly realized, wait, every freelancer's in sales. I have a strong distaste for this thing because I think it needs to look or be a certain way. And that really messed with me for a while. And I think to some degree, I self-sabotaged. And so that's why I want to share kind of my approach, right? First, a real sort of sales story. This is my youngest, Ellis, after he got into a fight with some sidewalk chalk. And he is in this rooftop tent that I got from a company called iCamper. Now, iCamper is kind of interesting. They were a client of mine, and they got in touch about some product copy, right? And so what was so interesting about iCamper and how I ended up with this really cool piece of outdoor gear that I use to take my family camping in the Smoky Mountains. What's really cool about that is that when they first got in touch, all they really mentioned was product copy, right? And you've probably been in that experience, you know, you've had that experience or been in that situation where a client gets in touch out of the blue, and then they bring something up that they want. There's that initial request, right? So in this case, it was like, hey, you know, we have a bunch of products. We're an e-commerce company. Could you help us rewrite our product copy? It lacks personality or whatever. So in the past, I probably would have just said, sure, here's my pricing structure for product copy, right? You know, or if a client had asked in the past, what do you charge? I would have just given them an answer. Or what's your rate? I would have just given them an answer. And, you know, I'm sort of the order taker, and I'm like the waiter at a restaurant, and you tell me what you want, and I take down your order, and then I give you a price, right? But that's not how I handle sales anymore. And iCamper is a great example because how the conversation unfolded, right? And you've probably had situations like this where, you know, initially they ask for something that is like over here. But as you get to know them a little bit and as a discovery conversation unfolds, you realize, wait a second, we kind of started out over here on this like left edge of the dartboard. But, you know, as we're progressing, like more toward the right and toward the center, we're uncovering like the full edges of a project. So this request sometimes can become something much bigger, right? And so what happened with iCamper is that they originally said, hey, can you help us with product copy? And I'm like, well, I'd be happy to help you with that, but what led you to this conclusion? And we'll get into open-ended consulting questions more in a moment, but I just asked questions and began peeling off the layers and saying, here's the request, but underneath the request was, more of a desire. And underneath that desire was a real need. And the real need they had was, we've never defined our brand. And the reason our product copy just is kind of lukewarm and easily forgettable is because we haven't brought definition to what really makes us special. So of course it would be hard to have copy over here that's much more tactical. It would be hard for that to be really effective and memorable, right? So this buried dartboard analogy, where during a discovery conversation, you kind of uncover all the edges. This is a really good analogy for how I think about sales now. No matter what the client says when they first get in touch, maybe we should pump the brakes a little bit, slow down, take the time to sort of do some excavation together, and maybe we will find that the real need, the deep pressing need, is actually different than whatever the initial request was. So I want to pause just for a second and mention something from a guy I really admire. His name's Alan Weiss, and he's sort of an OG in the consulting world. And his book, $1 Million Consulting, is just essential reading for freelancers as far as I'm concerned. This is a paraphrase. He talked about how your goal with the first project is to get the fourth project, right? And maybe some of you have had that experience where you do get the initial request, you are the order taker, you give them a price, the project proceeds, you fulfill the contract down to the letter, and then the client is still vaguely disappointed because their initial request wasn't what they really needed, right? And maybe they don't come back to you next time because maybe their disappointment needs a place to go and they can't help but aim it at you, even though you did exactly what you said you were going to do when you said you were going to do it. And I found myself in that position of thinking, maybe it would be better to truly understand the client's needs and actually refer them elsewhere, like not just jump at their, like pounce on the request like a cat on a mouse, right? Or a cat on a mole in our house. We have 2 cats and they leave animals around. Anyway, maybe it would be better to turn away more projects because I truly serve the client by helping them figure out what they really need, build trust that way, and then with the clients who, I really can serve them, sell them bigger projects because we understand the full scope of their needs, right? So I love this idea of making sure that you have the fourth project in mind, building trust, even when you're just selling that first project, right? So you could think of it as efficient sales would be getting to the sale as quickly as possible. Effective sales is how can I build deep trust with this client? And sometimes that involves slowing the sales process as a whole down so you can ask better questions, get better insights, and ultimately better insights lead to bigger projects. Okay, so I'm going to talk you quickly through like 3 phases of the sales process. If you don't like this language because it sounds too sales bro-esque, then just ignore it, right? But there are these 3 phases. You could even say 4 because I think pre-discovery comes before the discovery call. Anyway, let's dive in. Okay, discovery. We don't even know what the project is yet. We need to find that out, right? So how do I handle this, right? When like iCamper reaches out and says, hey, we need some help, what do you do? So first things first, I'll actually ask them to fill out an intake questionnaire. And I know some freelancers have strong opinions about not giving clients homework. I have strong opinions about vetting clients thoroughly before I start working with them. And I would prefer to have more information and not waste anyone's time, even on a discovery call, if it's not a good fit. So I have an intake questionnaire, like what led you to this conclusion? What is the project, right? I'll even ask about budget, because if they have a shoestring budget that I already know isn't going to work, why do we need to then get on the discovery call, right? Always respect your own time and other people's. Intake questionnaires help you do that. Okay. Then I'll say, and then, obviously let's book a short discovery call. By short, I mean about 30 minutes long. I like to spend as much face-to-face time or Zoom FaceTime with clients as possible. Why? When you spend time with people face-to-face, you get more information through body language. More importantly, you form an emotional connection. I think, to be blunt, I get hired more after Zoom calls than I get hired after not doing Zoom calls. So whether you like being on camera or not, form that emotional connection with people, right? Okay. So those are the first two things, right? Now you're moving toward that short discovery call. This next thing is optional, but I have learned that it's really effective, again, for building an emotional connection, giving people a sense of your personality, right? I like to send a video message maybe 24 hours before we're all set up to meet on Zoom or face to face, right? And in that call, I'll just say, hey, I'm really looking forward to our chat or our meeting tomorrow. If you have any questions or if you've had any new insights since you filled out that intake questionnaire, please send them my way. Otherwise, I'll see you at 1 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday, March 8th, right? Or I should say, or you could send them that video. You can also send them what I would call like a welcome deck. Like if you have a certain way that you onboard clients or work with clients, or maybe it's a positioning deck. I've created these for clients. It's just like, what does make you special? If you've got all that information in a really pretty deck or presentation, that you could export as a PDF, go ahead and attach that to the email too. Anything to strengthen your positioning, right? All of this intake and onboarding process is designed to set you apart from the millions of other freelancers with your skill set, right? Don't you want these clients, even before they've really spent time with you, to think, wow, she is a total pro. Why has no other freelancer ever shepherded me through a process like this before, right? And then the last thing, you sent them the intake questionnaire. Go ahead and review their answers well before the call and write down any follow-up questions you have, anything else that you think needs clarification. Did you find anything confusing? Did you disagree with some of the conclusions they had come to? Like, what other information do you need to pull out from them to even know whether or not the project is a good fit, what the scope would be, timeline, like all of the factors required to make a project a success? You want to go into the call armed, having that list of follow-up questions ready to go. This does another thing of taking the pressure off of any kind of performance, right? Like if you over prepare for sales calls, you'll have more confidence during sales calls, right? Okay. Yeah. Final thing, I'm a talker. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm a verbal processor. I blather on too much sometimes. Remember that the person in the sales call doing the talking is the person doing the selling. You want your prospects to spend most of the time talking, because then they're selling themselves on working with you. If you just sit there and listen, they will leave that call thinking, wow, she was great. It's like they don't know anything about you. They just know that you asked good questions and gave them a chance to talk about their problems. People really like that. So going into calls over prepared prevents you from compensating for your insecurity or lack of preparation by talking too much. Okay, so once you get to the discovery call, right? It's like, how do you show up there? How do you think about your role during that call? Well, you're primarily a listener, collaborator, and expert guide. Again, you're not here to pitch or perform in any way. You're here to facilitate a process of self-discovery. And you do that by using open-ended questions to peel back the layers. You then sort of double click. Maybe I'm dating myself. People still double click, right? You double click on things they say and you're like, tell me more about that. You notice tension and their frustration and contradictions. When do they lean forward and get excited? Right? When they get excited, that may be a clue about where the real goal is, where the real project is. So you kind of follow the energy during calls, and then the whole time, right, you're taking furious notes. You always want to sell to people later in the language that they used, not whatever industry jargon that you use as a copywriter, web engineer, illustrator, that sort of thing, right? Also, if you haven't read Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, you'll see use labeling and mirroring here. We don't have time to go into those concepts, but kind of goes back to use people's language, match their body language too, right? Anyway, as you're going with your notes, highlight, underscore whatever the key outcomes are after, because like I said at the very beginning, you may notice as they talk about the project that what they're talking about is totally different than what they mentioned in their first email. It just happens on a regular basis. So list out those key outcomes, right? Now, when you think about what the most important questions are that you really need answers to, those are the ones that enable you to put together a really strong and strategic proposal. So these are the 6 that I recommend you ask, because these are going to be the pieces of your proposal. You know, why this project? What's the core problem you're trying to solve? We're not looking for like a Band-Aid. What's the holistic solution? Right? So if you know going into a discovery call, I have to get answers to these questions, and you have them sitting right next to you later, guess what? Oh, and also when you take notes and you capture their language, later, when you go to create the proposal, it's so much easier to create proposals because you just flow in your notes, right? You're not trying to gin up anything. Like, how many of you have created proposals where you come to another section of your template and you've got to like create cotton candy, you've got to like use sugar and hot air to have some fluff to put into this section of your proposal? You don't have to do that anymore if your proposal sections are directly linked over to the questions that you asked during the discovery call. Okay. Now, you might have mentioned new ideas and perspectives. I found this really cool study from the RAIN group about the single most important thing needed to win projects. So here's the link if you actually want to check out the original study. I thought it was pretty interesting that they analyzed 43 different factors, and the number one factor required to win projects was, did I educate buyers with new ideas and perspectives? So when the RAIN group interviewed the buyers, like, hey, why did you choose this service provider over that one? 3 times more than any other factor, the number one factor was, they taught me something new, right? And so I know I just said, hey, you need to spend most of your time listening. That's true. But when you do talk, ideally, you'll just be facilitating those aha moments, telling them something that they didn't know about copywriting, about web engineering, about illustration, right? Okay, so what are the goals for discovery calls? Bring clarity, ask good questions, create aha moments by sharing new ideas and perspectives. This is how you earn trust, right? And ultimately you command higher project prices if people trust you. So you remember, discovery call is not for pitching, it's for earning trust, right? Okay, take lots of notes. Those notes will become the content you need for the proposal. Already covered that, right? And then toward the end of the discovery call, you can just say, hey, can I tell you back or repeat back what I heard? You share what you heard. Here are the outcomes, right? Here's what I noticed. And then you're like, by the way, like, what's the value of this project to you? You don't have to ask about budget. You're like, what's this project worth? What's a new lead worth? Well, what will it mean for your company if we finally define your brand definitively for the first time? Well, we're, like suddenly they're the ones who are like helping you benchmark the value of the project against the value of the outcome. And that's where you really want to be. Value-based pricing, where again, you're anchored against the value of the outcome. You're not anchored against whatever cheaper price another freelancer may charge, right? Okay. I'm going to hustle because I know we're not running out of time, but we need to get to Q&A, right? I do think this is an important point. This is a big aha for me. If you listen closely, your prospects will tell you what they want to buy and how they want you to sell that to them. And remember, it's always more effective if you sell to people in the language that they used, not the language that you would use. Don't translate. Use their language in your proposals, right? Okay. Last little tactical thing, 5 minutes to go in your discovery call. Ask them to open their calendar. Go ahead and book the follow-up call where you're going to discuss the proposal together while you're still on Zoom. Book this at the end of the discovery call. That way you're not doing the whole sort of scheduling chase, running in circles over email, right? Just book it at the end of the first call. And I've never had someone say, no, I'm not ready to book the follow-up call right now, right? But after I've sent the proposal, I have had someone cancel the follow-up call. This is a good thing, because if you send over a proposal and you're confident that it will solve their problems and they say something like it's too much or whatever, aren't you glad that you're not going to waste more time? Like, you actually, once they have the proposal, you don't necessarily want them to keep a follow-up call when they have no intention of hiring you, right? So you remember, if you build trust, the goal is to help the client get what they need. The goal is not to is not for you to win the project. It's a totally different mindset with sales, right? Helping you get what you need, not just trying to shoehorn what I want into your budget. Okay. So here's what one of my recap emails looks like. After I have a discovery call, I will send my notes or like the summary of them. And then I'll say at the end, did I miss anything? Is this accurate? I actually need them to go ahead and like sort of pre-approve what the project is. In $1 Million Consulting, Alan Weiss calls this a conceptual agreement, right? We need to agree on what the project is after the discovery call before I put together a proposal. It's like, how many of you have put together a proposal and it was sadly after sending it that you realized you quoted a project that the client didn't even really want, right? So you need them to say, yes, you heard me well. This is what I wanted. And I'm excited to see a proposal from you, all right? This is also their opportunity to clarify, share new insights, further enrich your understanding so that you are more likely to send a proposal that will be very attractive to them. Okay, proposal, this won't take that long. Again, we've already done all the hard work with the summarization in that email and then with the discovery call, right? the big paradigm shift here is you think about a proposal as being a story of transformation focused on value rather than a project with a price. So remember when I said, hey, in the discovery call, make sure that you're quantifying value. Well, that's in part because we need to know what the value of the transformation is going to be. There are a number of different ways that you can do that. These are some numbers I pulled from Jonathan Stark. Ditching Hourly is his podcast. Anyway, I thought this was cool. You don't have to benchmark or quantify value this way. It is an option, but you do need to have some clear language around what's the value of the transformation, right? If you get to the point in your proposal where you don't have enough clarity, stop, follow up, like get more information out of them, right? So I won't just read this slide. You all have probably put together proposals before, but this is just sort of like the meat and potatoes of proposal creation. Okay, I already kind of covered this. The reason you want really good notes is because you turn that into the content. The 6 questions I showed you become the 6 key sections in your proposal. I already kind of mentioned this, if there's nothing else you all walk away with having learned about proposals, it's a proposal should tell a story of transformation, right? Okay. You're welcome to borrow my proposal structure if you want. I wouldn't say there's anything fancy to it. Again, just use those 6 questions, right? And then best practices: avoid jargon, use plain English, keep the tone conversational, change passive voice to active. What is it about freelancers that it's like we're so great when we're like talking to a client over coffee, but as soon as we start writing proposals, we sound like 18th century attorneys or something, like from England, where it's like hitherto fors and like talk in your proposals the way you would talk in real life, right? Because here's the thing, sometimes depending on the client, they may shop your proposal around and get approval or feedback from other people in the organization. So even if you on the call are talking to like a VP of marketing who really gets all the marketing lingo, or like a head of engineering who really gets all the engineering lingo, and so you're like, great, and so you just poop all over your proposal with jargon. Well, what happens when that VP of engineering sends it to a CEO, or that VP of marketing sends it to like a financial controller, a CFO, a CRO, because they just need to run it up the flagpole and get approval. And that person has no idea what you're even talking about because there's so much jargon. Use plain English. I'll move on. Okay. People can't get excited if they're confused. This is why you use like plain English, right? Sell to people in their own language. Use plain English or whatever your native language is, right? All right. Closing. This is just basic stuff as far as I'm concerned. The successful outcome is the client's need being met, the client's clarity. It's not you landing the project. And if you do show up to a second call and you find out that they're not interested, you don't get defensive. Figure out why they're not interested, right? But when you're on that second call, this question right here is magic. What would you like to do? You're not trying to back them in a corner and extract like a rotten tooth or something, extract a yes out of them. There's no sort of manipulation here. You did the discovery, you sent the proposal, you talked through the proposal together, and then you asked them, what would you like to do? It's that simple, right? And you have to sit in the discomfort of silence and let them answer the question instead of filling it with words, which can be hard for this guy, right? Anyway, yeah, if it turns out that it's a no-go, you can still keep in touch, right? There's a chance that you could still get the same project months down the road. That's a whole other separate workshop, right? Follow up. But even if you're disappointed, get as much information as you can out of them, understand perhaps hidden factors that led to getting a no, leave that second follow-up call smarter than you went in. I love what this guy, Alex Hermozzi, says, that sales is a transfer of belief. So remember, as you get on these discovery calls and you are selling, that if you're selling a story of transformation, you really have to believe it. There are few things that are more powerful in sales than actually being passionate about other people's prospering, right? Okay. One final thought before I show the checklist, which is just the summary. This can be really overwhelming. I recognize that, but it's actually pretty cool if you think in terms of freelance growth, like you think of freelance growth in terms of 26% gains. So maybe you don't totally transform your business overnight using like this process or a totally different approach to proposals, right? But if you think in terms of getting 26% better with the number of leads you're getting, so your marketing, with your win rate, meaning how you handle the sales process, with your sale value, meaning project size, if you just get 26% better in each of these areas, that will actually become 200% more revenue, which is super cool. So just focus on incremental improvements in each of these areas. How many leads am I getting? How many of those projects am I winning? And what was that project worth, right? Okay. I'm not going to go into the math. This just, builds out what I went into here. If you want to watch the full video, you can take a screenshot. A friend of mine, Joey Gilkey, who's a sales expert, was talking to me about this. So it's not a bad listen during lunch one day. Go ahead and take a screenshot of this. These are the steps.
So we're going to, Austin, we're going to send a PDF version of this out to everybody. So.
Perfect. So ignore the screenshot idea. You can find me at Freelance Kate, and let's talk Q&A.
Awesome. Okay, we've got some amazing questions here. So go ahead and vote too on questions. I'm going to start with this one. It's easy for me to say, yeah, we can do that too, instead of sticking to my guns on what I actually want to sell. How do you fall for not adding something in that you wouldn't normally, you wouldn't want to do? How do you stay strong in your ideal product offering?
So I do think it helps to have kind of like a roster. I mean, a Google sheet, a spreadsheet where you have people that you trust and will happily collaborate with. So I think you'll experience less tension in selling the client what they really need if you know that specific parts of those needs or specific pieces of the project, you're just not going to do. So that's the way I've handled it, is as I've gotten more and more specialized, I've gotten more and more enthusiastic about just referring them elsewhere. Oh, I don't do identity design. Go hire my friend Ruthie. Oh, I don't do SEO. Go hire my friend so-and-so, right? So that's what I do, is bring in other freelancers.
And I think that's a big piece of thinking more like a business than an individual, right? When you look at successful businesses, there's partnerships everywhere, right? Like businesses are very good at staying focused on their core competency and bringing others in as they need to. So like, I think that it's an important mentality shift as a freelancer matures into thinking like a business.
100%. And I think your credibility goes up if you say no. that it's a weird kind of psychological quirk, but people actually trust you more if you willingly turn down certain pieces of a project, because you're like, no, I could do that for you, but my friend so-and-so is going to do it better. Like, wouldn't you trust someone who refused to take your money? Because you're like, wow, they actually really care about the outcomes here. So
I want to get to this one. It's got lots of votes here. How do you handle clients that prefer not to provide answers to your question on a discovery form, and instead want to talk over a phone call?
So they essentially refuse to fill out the intake questionnaire. Is that?
Yeah, and I think the question is that a sign that they won't cooperate for future parts of the project? Like, how would you handle someone like that?
I would call that a yellow flag, not a red flag.
That's good.
People are busy. And, back to the earlier point, like, no one loves filling out questionnaires, especially if they're trying to hire you. That being said, it's a yellow flag. So when you do show up to the discovery call, you're going to pay attention to things like, were they on time? You're going to pay attention to, like, well, as they respond to email communication, are they thorough? People who refuse to be thorough, methodical in their communication and in their interactions with you, it's like, if that is evident early on, that will probably be evident throughout. It was Maya Angelou in a conversation with Oprah said, when people show you who they are, believe them. So just try to be very, very observant throughout. But I don't think it's like a deal breaker when they can't or won't fill out the questionnaire.
Yeah, love that. I want to talk, there's a few questions on, like, practically, can you clarify on timelines from pre-discovery, discovery, proposal meeting, and closing, an ideal number of days between each phase?
So when I'm booking the follow-up call, I normally look 7 days out. And that gives me at least a couple of days to create my proposal. I hate creating proposals. Like, let's just go ahead and put that out there. I don't like it. But I'll do it very, very quickly, give it some time to, like, age or whatever you want to call it. I'll come back a couple of days after I finished it. I'll do a final polish. And then I typically send the proposal the morning of the follow-up call. But honestly, I don't have a regular sales cycle. I mean, I've done discovery calls and then somebody finally closes months later. I've sent recap emails and people are like, well, this is really good. I don't even need a formal proposal from you. I still think the showman or showwomanship of a formal proposal can sometimes enhance your positioning, right? But that said, I don't think there is a set time frame. It's going to be different with every client. That said, do stick to your process. When you're booking discovery calls, do it as quickly as you can after first contact. When you're booking your follow-up calls, you don't need more than 7 days. Like, get your proposal done, that sort of thing. When you get on that follow-up call, I like to get an answer then and there, because it's like, do they really need more information before they can make a decision? Probably not. That being said, you don't need to force it. So, I mean, Jeff, what do you think? What have your sales cycles looked like?
I mean, I think a lot, for the freelancer, your sales cycle is going to be dictated many times by the size of the organization that you're selling into. Big organizations have more layers of approval, less
Yes.
autonomy, longer sales cycles. And so if you're selling into a big, Fortune 500 company in their marketing department, if you're going to write content, like, expect it's going to take some time to get that deal done. Expect there'll be more time between meetings.
Mhm.
If you're selling into a 15 or 20 person company where you're working directly with the CEO, I mean, you could close that deal same day, right?
Mhm.
So, like, that's probably, like, if you had to predict sales cycle, I would say size of the organization is probably the most correlated with determining what to expect in terms of meeting cadence and close time.
So good. Did you have the discovery call with the final decision maker? If not, add a couple months, right? Or a couple weeks at least.
All right. Well, we are over our time by a couple of minutes. So I know there's a few questions that haven't gotten answered, but I'll make sure that I pull, Austin has a bunch of content. So I'll make sure I pull some of the ones that I know that he's answered and include that in the follow-up email. So just want to say a huge thank you to Austin and thank you to everyone who is here. We want to respect your time. So we appreciate you a ton and we hope we see you at a future workshop.
Thanks, everybody.